This is a terrific opportunity for me to praise a very, very good friend of mine, a colleague, actually. Jeff and I met when we were both on the air at NBC here in New York City. He's a colleague. He's the godfather, I may say, of my children. We're longtime friends, and his wife Kim, who is an excellent editor and also great, cohort grandmother. Thrilled to be a part of this extended family. He's also a Harlem resident, which is also in sync with Hue-Man Books, a wonderful collaboration. We are here tonight to listen to Jeff talk about his new acclaimed book, The Age of Greed, The Triumph of Finance, and the Decline of America, 1970 to the present. It is yet another incisive look at our economy following Jeff's previous economic analysis bestsellers, The End of Affluence, Taking America, Why Economies Grow, and The Case for Big Government. A regular contributor to the New York Review of Books and a former economics columnist for the New York Times, Jeff is the editor of Challenge magazine, a senior fellow at the Roosevelt Institute, and the Schwartz Center at the New School. He's also adjunct professor of the humanities at the Cooper Union. And here's what some reviewers have said in a long list of rave reviews about The Age of Greed. Paul Krugman and Robin Wells in the New York Review of Books say that this is a fascinating and deeply disturbing tale of hypocrisy, corruption, and insatiable greed, a reminder of just how we got into the mess we're in. And David Greenberg of the Washington Post said, Age of Greed abounds with powerful men, ugly fights, infamous scandals, twists and turns, and, true to the book's title, lots of shameless cupidity. Now, that is a heck of a write-up for a book about the usually less than scintillating, most of us would say, thing called economics. But once again, Jeff Madrick has exposed the key players, the deeds, and the reckoning exacted during these fast and loose and dangerous times that we are living in. Jeff Madrick, the floor is yours.
Well, Carol, thank you. Carol has been a very close friend for many years. When I was struggling to be good on camera, I'd always look and envy at how good she was, naturally. Here we are today wondering, of course, how we got here. And I want to thank all of you at Hue-Man Books for inviting me to talk. Kim and I now live in this community. We're delighted to be here. We had to protect our house from the ravaging Hudson River the other day, the hurricane. In fact, we didn't have to, as it turned out. It was fine. Well, the rain was pretty bad, come to think of it. In any case, let me get on with this subject, because it does change. I was going to come to talk about how we got here, and I am going to talk about how we got here. But then it started to occur to me that we don't even now know where we are. 4 years ago, Ben Bernanke, the chairman of the Federal Reserve, and a bright and I believe well-meaning, if often misdirected man, said if those subprime mortgages collapse, those mortgages made to people who had low incomes and poor credit and were often conned into taking mortgages they couldn't afford, even if we had a high default rate on those mortgages, we wouldn't have a financial crisis. This was the chairman of the Federal Reserve, August 2007. 2 months later, red in the face, he realized we were about to enter the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression. How did he not know that? What he also didn't know, what no Republicans or Democrats knew, what very few economists knew across the political spectrum, was we wouldn't get out of this problem even 4 years later. We wouldn't have solved the central problems of the economy. What happened was a financial crash and then a great recession, we now call it. The worst recession since the Great Depression. Recession means high unemployment, low wage growth or actually falling wages, no growth in opportunity, lots of bankruptcies, and in this case, many, many people who thought they owned their homes and no longer do. We thought we knew. We thought we knew how to get out of recession then. Bernanke knew he had to take many emergency actions to pump up the financial system again. President Obama, in one of his more courageous efforts, passed an economic stimulus bill of $800 or $900 billion, which helped. Turned out wasn't nearly enough, but it helped. Obama economists, almost all economists, expected us to do far better. What's happened since then? President Obama took office, inherited one of the worst economic situations of the last century and 10 years, did provide a stimulus, didn't do enough in the end, but we thought that unemployment at least would be going down some by this point. It's reached 10%. It's now at 9%. Actual unemployment, if we include all those looking for full-time work who can't get it or are discouraged, actual unemployment is more like 15 or 16%. Outrageous. Wages on average have gone down. And what's gone up? Corporate profits. Corporate profits have gone up enormously. Bankers' bonuses have gone up enormously, and the economic problems haven't been solved. So what happened? How did we get here? I think we haven't been able to come up with a proper solution, partly because the problem is so difficult. We haven't faced a situation where so many people, including business, are indebted. It is very hard to get an economy afloat again in that kind of circumstance, and we should recognize that. But number two, we've had an attitude about how to manage the economy that simply hasn't been good enough. The wrong people, or I should put it differently, the wrong attitudes have been determining the sorts of solutions that we've had. The essence of this book, Age of Greed, is that this crisis did not start in the 2000s. It didn't even start in the 1990s under Bill Clinton, who did contribute through financial deregulation. It really started back in the 1970s. I want to make 3 or 4 major points. One is, it started in the 70s. Number 2 is, individuals did this. There are people to blame. There are institutions to blame. There are the way institutions are run can be blamed. When this crisis occurred, a bunch of men stood or sat, and they were men, indeed. I'm not being sexist here. They were only men, the people who ran these major financial institutions. And they included the great Warren Buffett, who's occasionally on the right side of issues. And they all said this was a systemic problem. It really wasn't anyone's fault individually. These things simply occur every 3, 4, 5, 6 years. You can't blame anybody. I spoke to them. I've known some of them as journalists and economic analysts for many, many years. They said the same thing to me off the record as they said on the record. You can't blame us. Who knew? Did you know, Jeff? Did you know all about this? Of course, I pointed out to them that I was not the president of the New York Federal Reserve or the chairman of the Federal Reserve in Washington or the president of the United States. I wasn't even the head of a major bank. Those are the people who should have known. Those are the people who could have looked into some of these structures and said, there's something wrong here. Now, the truth is, I knew something was wrong here, as did others. But I don't think anybody knew the extent of it. So let's go back for a moment to the 1970s and see what happened. Because the third factor I want to emphasize is, number one, it started in the 1970s. Number two, individuals did do this to us and could have changed the flow of history. But number three, there was a major attitudinal shift towards government in the 1970s, indeed against government. And I know many of you were not fully adults in the 1970s, but some of you are, that turned Americans from a favorable attitude to what government could do to high skepticism about government. Now, how did this happen? And it happened in only a few short years, really. Well, there are many contributors, and I don't want to oversimplify this history. The Vietnam War of the 1960s made people skeptical of government. Indeed, Washington lied to us a bit about the Vietnam